Hey everyone, just a light video for you today. I'll be playing Moon ETF deck against some guy called Dan Dargenio. If you don't know him, it's fine. He didn't make top 8 at Euros, so he must be pretty scrubby. But anyway, if you want, the interesting thing was that Dan Dargenio was actually streaming this. So if you want to watch the other side of this game where he plays from his side and provides commentary, be sure to check out Stim Hacked Twitch channel. The link is here. I'll try to link it in the description, video description. But for now, let's get into the video. So I'm playing Moon ETF against some wizard variant which I don't know. So I keep my opening hand because it has eyes and it has double advanced assembly line. Seems pretty good. It also has an encryption protocol, so I'm going to drop it straight away. And hopefully if he checks the servers in the wrong order, the protocol can do some serious work. My opponent gets the Liberator accounts right off the bat, so this pretty good economy source that allows my opponent to keep up with assets, and he trashes my protocol. So that's not very good for me. I continue spamming out here. DBS and advanced assembly line. So I actually have a lot of latent money on the board, both advanced assembly lines on the table, and in case my opponent plays Temujin contracts, I can thwart my opponent's efforts with advanced assembly lines into ice. My opponent drops a Mimic here, and at this point I'm thinking there's an Architect on HQ. They could easily go for a Siphon next turn. So I immediately use one of my advanced assembly lines to protect HQ just in case my opponent had Siphon. Big mistake. Yeah, this was a huge mistake because Siphon decks do not run Mimic. I wasn't thinking straight there. Siphon decks run MK Ultra, so this was my very first trip up. What could have been a very good piece of ice in Fair Shout 3 was instead dedicated to use the server in HQ. I did ice up my Jackson here. I think it was quite important for me to get Jackson draw because I did not see Estelle Moon early on. Estelle Moon is what powers this ETF deck. I'm playing a somewhat spammy variant, so it will be quite important to have Estelle Moon protected. That being said, I would like to have more ice on this Jackson Howard. Now my opponent has completely controlled my board. All the assets that I played out in my first few turns have been trash. Wizard is very powerful that way. I finally do find my Estelle Moon, and now I'm thinking, what's the best way to get the Estelle train going? I figured the best way was to flood my hand with assets, and then drop the Eli on R&D. From there, I would drop a couple of stuff, including, 6 assets. That is exactly what you want to see. And 2 Estelles. This is a very nice hand for me to have. And the best thing is there were 2 encryption protocols. So this was really good for me. The problem was my opponent injected last turn and showed me a Temujin. Unfortunately, I can't defend against the Temujin. So my opponent's going to be rich here, but hopefully I'll be rich as well after dropping the Estelle Moon and 2 assets. So I'm going to drop 2 encryption protocols here, no brainer. And here I ask myself, do I respect the kitty cat, the rumor mill? Since my opponent showed Temujin, he's spending influence on Temujin. I figured he didn't have it. I was so wrong. So wrong. Nothing I could do about this. Well, I could have popped Estelle Moon. That would have helped a lot. But I didn't. So there we go. My opponent gets my Estelle Moon, and this is a huge tempo swing against me. Even though I forced my opponent to pay 2 extra because of the encryption protocols, this is still very bad for me. The worst thing is the kitty is still up, so the second Estelle Moon in my hand is quite dead. I can't do anything about it, and I actually misplay here. I play out a bunch more assets, and this is bad. You don't really want to play more assets here. You want to be saving these assets for powering your second Estelle Moon when you eventually do get rid of the kitty cat. So this was a mistake. I should have held the DBS back in hand, maybe bait my opponent into the Architect with advanced assembly lines behind the Architect, but I definitely shouldn't be just tossing lots of assets like I'm doing here. Even though this is an asset spam deck, it's a mistake to just play all your assets from your hand, because what you're gonna see later is that when I run out of assets to spam, I just can't get a big enough moon to reliably close out the game. So this is actually a big problem with this deck that I'm not really sensitive to. I haven't really played this deck a lot. I mean, any moon spam deck in general, because for obvious reasons, it's not a very enjoyable deck to play. But now that I'm trying it, it's really tricky. It's not as straightforward as one would think. It's not just about dropping all your assets on the table. You see that even though I'm just playing it very linearly like most people would, just dropping whatever assets you draw on the table and hoping that they can't contest it. It's not that simple. My opponent has done a very good job of keeping a flow on money, and yeah, I can't punish my opponent for it. So at this point, the best I can do is to drop an ELP here and to get rid of the rumor mill. So my next turn would be, assuming my opponent doesn't find a second rumor mill, my next turn would be to start getting the moon train going. This is why I didn't play the clone suffrage movement last turn, because I wanted to drop the clone suffrage here, get a moon trigger, and then friends for 2 more moon triggers. I'm gonna get 2 encryption protocols, and yeah, just pre-res them in case my opponent's on hacktivist meeting. Then I'm going to draw a bunch of cards. It's mostly ABT. So this is where the agendas start coming in instead of the assets. I had a pretty good draw in the early to mid game, but this is starting to turn sour. Thankfully, I still have a bunch of eyes on HQ, so I don't have to worry too much about HQ attacks, but my opponent's slowly but surely chewing away at my remotes. Now, Hacktivist is up, but I still rest the clone suffrage movement here because I definitely need to get rid of the Hacktivist with ELP. So this is usually why Moon Spam is so powerful. Because if you try to countercurrent the ELP, and you haven't checked all your opponent's remotes, there's a chance that they might have a clone suffrage on the board. The clone suffrage will return the ELP back to hand, and as you saw here, my opponent's back under ELP. So for running my CSM, my opponent is going to pay 2 clicks, and that's very expensive. This is not something my opponent wants to do. Meanwhile, they still continue checking my remotes because they have to respect the threat of CSM. And I let my opponent trash Jackson Howard here. They choose not to, instead getting a Maw trigger. So now Maw is starting to become a real problem. It's going to start chipping away at cards from my hand, which is going to prevent me from spamming out as much as I want to. Speaking of spamming out, because all my SL's in the bin now, I'm not actually going to be able to draw as much as I like, and this is a problem. So I guess I need to get some momentum going on my side, which is why I chose to score the ABT here. Hopefully get a bunch of ice. I haven't been drawing that many. So yeah, I do find 1 piece of ice on the ABT, and I'm going to get the Architect on some server. Some server probably being R&D here. Then I'm going to Jackson away the 2 ABTs in the bin, followed by 1 Estelle Moon. I hope to draw the Moon in good time. The reason why I proactively used Jackson there was because my opponent might have a Rumor Mill right now, and I can't let my opponent get 4 points in the bin. So the Jackson has to go. Remember that ELP is still up, so my opponent had to pay 2 clicks to get the Maw trigger here and trash the encryption protocol. So this is the advantage of having your ELP set up with assets. Unfortunately, we are now at a time where most of my assets are actually in the bin rather than in my deck. So I spend my entire turn drawing up. No assets. It's all agendas. I mean, it's not the worst, because usually at this point you would just play Biotics to score out these ABTs in my hand, and I have both Biotics in my hand. The trouble is, I don't actually have the money to support this. So I'm just going to click for credits here and go for the alternate win condition of using a Helium Beta test. I didn't want to discard any of these cards in my hand. It's absolutely crucial that I keep ELPs in my hand, because counter currents are the worst possible thing that can happen to me. So unfortunately, I have to pitch the Biotic here, knowing that I don't have the money to support scoring by Biotic. Yeah, this is a bit iffy. Biotic is the main win con for Moon ETF decks in general, and I was not helping my win cause by, you know, pitching Biotics like that. But I really want to get the Helium Beta test off. It feels like that is my opening to getting back in this game, because if I go to the Biotic route, I'm not going to win. My opponent has my remotes very well locked down. I mean, I've gone through all my encryption protocols, and my opponent was still able to control my board state, which just tells me one thing. Asset spam is not going to work. So I need to find some other way of doing this, and the way of doing this is to lure my opponent into the remote with an Estelle Moon. Hopefully they trash it and leave themselves on too few credits. That way I can get a Helium Beta test off. Hopefully that gets me back in the game. But my opponent smartly plays Dirty Laundry, so that gives them a lot of money. It looks like I'm not going to be able to fire this beta test because I need to outtrace my opponent. But they install a daily cast. Aha! Things change. Now do some maths here. It looks like I can beat my opponent on the trace, and I will do exactly that. Install Turtlebacks in the Architect server, take a credit, and here we go. Trace +6, and I get to trash 2 non-program cards. I would love to trash that Mimic, but the next best thing I can trash is the Maw, followed by the Daily Cast with 8 credits. My opponent's rich enough that I could consider trashing the Peddler instead, but I think every credit counts again in this deck, which attempts to tax out the runner. So my opponent runs HQ here, and I drop the Fairchild 3 on my opponent, which they're forced to click through. They see one card, they see the beta test. Okay, that's fine. I do have a global foot in the bin. I pitched that last turn, so I need to be very, very wary of that. My opponent's actually very close to winning now. I mean, it's pretty natural. I've drawn through more than half my deck, and the agendas are nowhere to be found. So if they're not in my hand, which they're not, and that means they must be in R&D and in the bin. So this is a big problem for me. Now my opponent finds their rig, and this is where things go downhill. The major benefit of Moon ETF, and the reason why it's so strong, is because when you're playing the asset spam game, your opponent simply has no time to assemble their rig. But my opponent, with a combination of Temujin, early Temujin, and conscientious running on the remotes, my opponent was able to slowly but surely get their rig going. And this means that now I cannot keep them out of centrals, I can't keep them off of remotes. This is going to be a very, very uphill battle. It is arguable that I should be playing ELP at this point to slow down my opponent, make it very difficult for them to run my remotes. The trouble is, if I play ELP, they'll simply run my centrals and easily steal agenda points. So, I mean, there's even a global foot in the bin for my opponent to steal. So all three centrals are very vulnerable now, and it's very hard to play ELP when I'm so poor. My opponent gets at my total backs, but I get some revenge with CSM. Unfortunately, at this point, it's a bit too little too late. This CSM is not going to be of very much impact. Against other decks where you get a more critical mass of assets going, CSMs can be really, really nasty for your opponent to deal with. But in this scenario, it's not nearly enough. So I'm staring down the friends in my hand, and I'm going, how am I going to get the friends and the res total backs? Because I do have total backs in silver 13, I need to res it before playing the friends to get some money. I'm going to get an encryption protocol and a total backs, both in new remotes to trigger total backs. So this is the least I can do to hopefully claw some tempo my way, or rather claw some tempo away from my opponent. But without ELP, it's rather trivial for my opponent to run around and trash stuff. They're not that poor. Yeah, so they take down the most important target there in CSM, and I'm left staring down a hand of ELPs and Vitruviuses. My opponent hammers HQ, and I know time is up. They know as full well as me that if the agendas are not on the table, and you know, I've gone through most of my deck, they have to be in hand, and sure they are. This is one thing that most people don't do often enough against Moon ETF. You need to check HQ often. It's very difficult because you need to set up your rig first in order to do that, and well, you can't really set up your rig very well when the ice is so chunky. Your Fairchild 3, your Architects, these are nasty ice for most runners to deal with. But my opponent's completely set up, their Mimic Yonk rig is up with the ice cover, with the Data Sucker. I'm completely stuck. I didn't draw any assets, so I wasn't able to spam out. As a result, my opponent is just going to run HQ 4 times here. The funny thing that's about to happen is, as you're about to see, even though my opponent has a 40% chance of hitting stuff in my hand, Dan keeps missing. I mean, a lot of people give Dan a lot of, keep saying that Dan's a very lucky player. Well, this is where he spends his bad luck on. He's not getting my Vitruviuses, even though his odds are so heavily favored. Just one more agenda, by the way, and he wins. So that's how close he is. This is his last run. Finally finds it. So yep, that's the game. So compared to most other competitive players, I definitely feel I'm very far behind in terms of keeping up with the latest and hottest tech in the meta. In other words, Moon ETF. I'm clearly very unaware of how to play this deck and what priorities you need to have when piloting this deck. There were definitely a lot of misplays, and if there were any more that I did not spot during the video, please feel free to comment and let me know what I could have done better during the game. In general, what I've learned this game is that, well, Moon ETF is fragile, that goes without saying. Hate cards kind of cause it trouble. Even just Wizard, the idea itself, causes a lot of trouble. I wasn't even able to deal with the ID alone. I realize how important Moon is, because it's basically your ticket to getting more cards and vomiting more cards out of the table. The problem with the rate I was playing the game was that I was maybe churning out roughly slightly more than one asset per turn, and that was not good enough, period. You need to be dropping lots of assets every turn. You need to be using cards like Friends and Jeeves to accelerate the rate at which you drop assets on the table. Because one per turn is very easily handleable by Wizard, especially one that runs Temujin as well. So this is definitely a very big learning point. I was just playing assets as I drew them, which was a big mistake. I should be looking to go for those big turns where I get 3 assets on the table with an Estelle Moon charged up. Then the next turn, use Estelle Moon, get a couple more cards, and then drop 3 more assets, rinse and repeat. Your opponent can't check them all, and once you get a CSM through, your friends are just right around the corner to continue spamming. That's how you win the game, and I did not do that. Again, let me know if I could have improved my gameplay, and if you want to watch this game from my opponent's side, be sure to check out Stimhack's twitch.tv. Again, I'll leave a link in the description. In the meantime, thanks for watching, and as always, happy net running. I'll see you around.